Previously on Maplestory the novel, Sacred Tears.
It's not enough!
I'm not patronizing you. I'm asking a legitimate question.
If you're going to use this darkness, you'll have to overpower its synergetic property at every stage.
Have faith in the Master, as I do, that he will find the answer.
We aim to guard the temple, the corridor of regrets, your mother, and you.
Clank, why am I here?
And now, the continuation of Chapter 19, Part 2.
I do not think it is a matter of loving you or not. Your mother has made it clear that you are both loved and important to the world of Usoria.
But that's just the thing. If they loved me, wouldn't they spend at least a little time with me?
Clank floated over to Rhinne, sliding out a hand and putting it on her shoulder. He could say nothing. He was but a knight of the temple, made and explicitly trained to protect it, the goddess, and now her daughter. He had no wisdom or comfort to offer her.
Have you made any friends in Usoria? They must be eager to see you again.
Clank offered.
There are a few, though Mother often tells me not to get attached to any of them. Time flows much differently here, and they will be gone in a few short decades. And the more I stay there, the higher the chance the darkness will corrupt me.
Rhinne mocked, trying to sound like her mother.
Time may flow differently, but since your birth, the time difference seems to have stabilized into a less drastic distortion. Only a few months go by in a day here instead of a random, unknown amount of time,
Clank explained. Rhinne sighed and let her head drop to her hands.
It's still different. Mother says that within a month I'll be an adult. But I could still be a young woman for thousands of years, and by then, all the friends I made in Usoria will be long dead.
Deep in her heart, she didn't want to live out her days here in the Temple of Time. She wanted to live among the humans, where time had meaning and urgency. Every moment was as precious as gold, yet here, she treated it as a commodity.
I know! I'll ask Mother if I can live in Usoria for a while. No, more than a while,
Rhinne announced, picking her head up and setting her arms wide on the railing.
And she might say that is a bad idea,
Ariel said behind her. Rhinne jumped when she heard her.
Mother,
It's all right, Rhinne. I understand your feelings. I feel the same about your father. It seems stronger in you as you are half-human. But even as a demi-deity such as yourself, living among humans can cause problems if they find out who you are. And yes, even with your power of a light, the darkness is becoming stronger, and spending too much time there could corrupt you.
Rhinne huffed and looked away, staring off into the blackness of space.
what does she know? She's always here in the temple.
Rhinne thought, uninterested in her mother's words of logic that, while right, didn't sway her lonely spirit.
But your father will be there to protect you, and the friends you made in the Aurora could also help keep you and your secret safe. I'm sure Will especially would help with that.
Ariel smiled. Rhinne turned back with wide eyes.
You mean I could live in Usoria?
I am uncertain about living in Usoria, but I see no harm in staying among its people for a while. The Mirror of Time has nothing to show if you were to stay there for an extended period,
Ariel answered. Rhinne ran to her mother and hugged her tightly. The prospect of being among her real friends took her heart to new heights.
I assume that Lady Rhinne will no longer need me?
Clank asked, pointing to the ribbon on his pauldron.
Clank, you're special to me. Keep that ribbon on you so that when I come back, no matter how long it will be, I can always count on you to be here.
Clank stiffened and saluted, tucking his arms into his body.
Will you be leaving immediately?
Clank asked.
If Mother approves,
Rhinne replied, looking to Ariel for her answer, to which she smiled and nodded.
Then allow me to escort you to the temple's exit.
Rhinne bowed her approval as the two of them walked toward the front of the temple, while Ariel watched them leave. Behind her, Minerna and a monk of the Red stood watching from far off.
This could have a very dire turn, my goddess. One I think should not be ignored,
The monk said, taking her frowning mask from her face and tucking it into a large, loose sleeve.
It is a regret, that much is certain. But it must be left to Oblivion.
Minerna answered, turning away and walking further into the temple with the monk close behind.
Will it not exponentially increase the strength of the world's darkness? You said that...
I know what I said regarding him. But the mirror has shown the darkness will be gone because of Rhinne. She is the world's only hope, will be Ariel's largest regret, and will be remembered as the ultimate light of Usoria. We must stay the course.
But what about Rhinne? The chances of her corruption increase with every day she remains.
The light she and Will have created is strong, much stronger even than the white mage and Ariel.
I understand, my goddess. I will light another lamp in the Chamber of Oblivion,
The monk said, putting on her mask and turning to leave.
No, good monk. I will do it. I must be the one to bear the brunt of her agony when it comes.
The monk bowed, turning away to tend to some other duty, as Minerna made her way to the Chamber of Oblivion. Tahir could feel the warmth that Rhinne was greeted with and smiled to himself when he overheard that she would be staying with them for some time. Her two closest friends, Will and Eleanor, responded happily to the news. Tahir remembered the days with his friends when they were children and how they would become excited over something one of them had found. Despite its white and gold walls, a lingering cloud still hung over the Order. Tahir would feel chills running down his spine every time he was near Dane's laboratory, a chill that reached his soul. He brought it up with some of his other troopmates, and they too noted there was a chill near the lab. Despite this, Mars remained unwilling to admit or notice that something was wrong. And then there was the feeling that Tahir would get after the defeat of some of the omens. Someone was watching them. He couldn't explain it, but perhaps with the help of one of the other clerics, he could remain behind long enough to see who was haunting them with their presence. Strangely, the omens seemed to appear in Usoria less and less, contained instead within the Forest of Peace, but the world at large was still in turmoil. The biggest concern was rumors that King Hecaton of Kritos was readying to mount a massive attack against Pantheon. The Emperor of Usoria had mobilized nearly all of Orion's military forces to counter and stop Hecaton's thirst for power. Tensions between Usoria's east had begun to build. Al-Neth and Moon Terra, a place known for its fertile lands of medicinal herbs, had been disputing over trade agreements. Trade agreements between the Adil states and Usoria strained after a scuffle between Adilian soldiers and overconfident Usorian merchants, resulting in nearly 100 deaths. Additional skirmishes, uprisings, battles, and feuds also sprang up all over the continent. Tahir couldn't help but wonder if it all was due to the world's darkness influencing these events. For a week, Rhinne's time at the temple was filled with activity, diving into the ultimate light and its properties while helping Will and his control over mana. His mana reserves grew daily, as did his understanding of how Usorian magic and Rhinne's power differed. Through hours of study, Will found that Usorian magic, even from its discovery in the 7th Epoch during the Elfin Hunts, was a massive deviation from its original form. Elfin magic relied on mana, like Rhinne, to connect oneself with and channel natural energies through one's body. Mana was also used as a containment medium, so the resulting spell wouldn't spread in every direction after releasing these energies. The more mana a given mage had allowed for using far more power, more often, and for more extended periods. Mana also allowed a given mage to access these energies almost instantaneously, regardless of the amount of power. The only limiting factor for these mages was their amount of mana, rendering a mage helpless once depleted. Without a protector or other means of offensive or defensive skills, anyone could quickly capture or kill a mage. Usorian magic, by contrast, required sentences written with runes to contain natural energies and then expel them with the desired effect. Compared to Elfin magic, Usorian magic could be highly limiting due to more powerful versions of the same spell requiring more of a runic recitation. In contrast to mana-based magic, anyone could cast a spell without years of practice using sigils carved into wooden or metal medallions. However, this method could become cumbersome and expensive, as each spell required a different sigil and only allowed the use of a relatively small amount of power. Time and mental and physical stamina became limiting factors for well-studied mages of this magic. The quickest casting times for a spell required only a hand gesture or a word, but the spell became pathetically weak. Some mages learned how to cast more powerful spells with the same speed, focusing on envisioning the result of the magic instead of reciting the runic sentence. But it was still magnitudes weaker and slower than mana-based magic. Will theorized that ancient humanity may have at one time tried to use magic like the elves, but the inherent impatience of humanity led to the development of the current system of sigils and runic sentences.
So that's why it always felt wrong. I'm only using tiny amounts of power.
Rhinne sighed.
It's like taking a cup of water out of a lake versus swimming in it.
And mana-based magic can also be much more powerful in less time. Amazing.
But then, how does that relate to light magic? Isn't it based on the ultimate light?
Light magic's energy comes from the ultimate light. Usorian magic captures a small portion of that energy within a given spell sigil. The rune's strength limits its power. Mana-based magic connects you directly to the light, cutting out the limitations.
And now that I have my own ultimate light, the darkness is as good as gone.
Rhinne smiled, leaning over the table where they sat and kissing him on the cheek.
Almost. You still need to understand how to use it. Remember when you said that your father's ultimate light lacked something?
Rhinne tilted her head, remembering how her father's light was white compared to her and Will's gold.
Yes, but what does that have to do with it?
Master Dane's light is powerful, but its purpose is aimed at protection, eliminating the threat. Your light, in contrast, is focused on care and healing. I read somewhere in Master Dane's writing that the deity Hyam compared the darkness to a wound or a poison. Master Dane's light would be like cauterizing a severe wound. It's a good emergency measure, but isn't favorable for long-term healing. Our light is like treating the wound with care, medicines and bandages. It takes longer, but the overall healing effect will be greater.
But then, what is it missing?
I think the color of the light gives it away. His light lacks an emotional core. His focus is on the action, not the reason.
I don't think that's it either.
Rhinne countered, holding her chin in thought.
How so?
Will asked, readying his pen to take notes.
Light's power comes from emotion, so no emotions means no power. The only thing my father does differently is use the darkness to enhance his light.
What if using the darkness is the key?
What does that have to do with it?
There was a note I saw in Master Dane's research when he made the twins, saying that... here it is. To use darkness as a power source for the ultimate light, I was told that once I absorbed it, I would need to focus that power through a singular emotion. The resulting power is great, but it is still preliminary. Further study is required.
So, is using only a single emotion the cause?
I don't think that's all of it.
A third voice said, startling them as Orchid and Lotus entered the classroom.
What do you mean?
Will asked.
I overheard you, and I think you're on the right track of the darkness being the cause for Human Dane's light. But I think after he absorbs it, the combination of both light and dark gives it the color. You're seeing silver, but its brightness is making it look white.
Lotus explained, holding out his hand where a silver flame danced in his palm.
Wait, my father is absorbing the darkness? I thought he was just using it like any other energy for magic.
Rhinne exclaimed.
That's the only way Human Dane's been able to make his light as powerful as it is. It doesn't do much for his sanity, though.
Will and Rhinne looked at each other with panic in their eyes.
What's wrong with Master Dane?
Will prodded. Lotus sighed, lifting his brow and shaking his head as Orchid continued.
Dane's been around the stuff too long. He's getting obsessed with it. And with all the times he's absorbed darkness, some of it has to be staying behind. I can only hope it hasn't been slowly poisoning him.
She said worriedly.
So then, why must it be channeled through a single emotion? What's that got to do with absorbing darkness?
Rhinne asked. Lotus sighed long, appearing to prepare a lecture.
Darkness, in its purest form, is a chaotic mass of synergetic emotions. Focusing the darkness through a single emotion gives them a point of focus, realigning and changing them so that only one emotion is present, allowing Human Dane to make his light more powerful and resulting in its silver color.
So that's why he needs the ultimate darkness. Using the most powerful form will make the most powerful light. We'll need to ensure that our light is the strongest it can be so that you can erase the darkness easily when your father completes it.
Will smiled, taking Rhinne's hand. Armed with this new knowledge, Rhinne and Will forged ahead, practicing every day until their light began to radiate from them like a beacon, even without a spell. As they worked, Rhinne would often overhear clerics and acolytes talking about a cloud hanging over all of the Aurora temple, as well as a chill coming from her father's laboratory. She was well aware of it from the first time she ever set foot in the temple, being a place that scared her more than any other in the world. It didn't bother her as much anymore, but for the rest of the acolytes, who were normal humans to notice, it must mean that whatever she felt was getting worse. She saw a thick black mist coming through the door whenever she passed it, and her curiosity began to mount daily. Was this cloud stalling her father and making it harder for him to make discoveries? With her newly minted knowledge of light and magic, she could go in there and cleanse the darkness, allowing her father to make new and more significant strides. After staying at the Aurora Temple for nearly 6 months, she could no longer stand it. She needed to know what was in the room that terrified her and made such a potent cloud of darkness. After ensuring that Mars and her father were nowhere to be seen, she and Will confidently strode to the door, only to find it locked. With a small gesture and some magic, Rhinne played with the tumblers, unlocking the door with a satisfying click. Looking around one final time for Mars, Will squeezed her hand, light filling her being, then quietly ducked into the room. What greeted Rhinne as she turned around froze her soul. Countless voices assaulted her, hearing screams and moans of agony, rage, and sorrow. Beings made of black mist wandered aimlessly along the ceiling, babbling about heartaches, grief, and wrongs visited upon them in the past. One of the shadows caught sight of Rhinne as she stood in shock, lunging at her only to stop as if a chain had snapped tight and stopped it inches from her face. It shouted of embarrassment and humiliation, blaming her for its turmoil. The world fell away into a black nothing around Rhinne as the voices around her steadily became louder. The flood of emotion overwhelmed her as tears streamed down her face.
Stop. Please stop.
She muttered, covering her ears and crumpling to the floor, rubbing her arms and gripping her hair, trying desperately to find peace. But still, the maelstrom of voices grew. Every second crawled by as the feeling of ice clawed at her legs and arms, her pounding chest making her ears ring.
Stop it, please, stop. Stop it.
This was the darkness she had to overcome? And what about her light? What happened to her light? How was she supposed to eliminate this? Was it all a lie? A cruel and elaborate joke played for laughs at her expense? Was her father the perpetrator of this joke? Did he even want her to succeed? How did he not sense the mass of hatred and terror permeating this room? How could he think this was the way to heal the world? And where was Will? Why was their light not protecting her from this assault on her senses? Did he even care? If he cared, he would have come with her. Did he want her so full of fear that she would never leave him? As the questions were mounting, something grabbed her arm and hauled her up, slamming the door as she stumbled into Will's arms. The world burst back into existence for her, feeling the warmth of her and Will's light spreading through her soul until she heard Mars's thunderous rage.
What in Minerna's name were you doing in there?
Rhinne could say nothing as she recentered herself, making herself realize that Will had no ill intent for her. She was the one who wanted to see inside the lab.
What was all that? Do you know what's been going on in that room?
She demanded, looking at Mars with wide eyes.
It is precisely why no one but the Master and myself are allowed into the laboratory, and why you specifically are forbidden from going in.
How is that supposed to help me? It's nothing but a storm of suffering and anguish. How can you say that we will cure the world of darkness when it feels like my father's making it stronger?